All right, so we were working on getting our trips up and running, being able to create new trips, and we were dealing with all kinds of weirdness, or not weirdness. We were trying to deal with like, how do we get this to work so it looks good um, in the browser? In other words, when we create a trip, do we go to the right place? Do we do the right things? And I think that's kind of where we left off. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just see where we are and what's working. Don't know if I updated the devlog at the end of our last meeting, but I'll at least glance at it. Not a very quality devlog here. Not a very fast connection either. Am I sharing my screen? I am, right?
Yes, you are.
My tiny, tiny print screen here. Okay, thank you. No one's logged in. Okay. So what we did do, this isn't very good, but let's duplicate it anyway. This is now July 2nd. So what we did do was we added functionality around creating trips, right? That's basically what we did do. So let's kind of look at this now. So let's see if I can either sign up or log in. So let's go ahead and log in. We'll let Nadia log in because she has a bunch of stuff. And I can see this menu, my trips, new trip, logged in is Nadia, log out. And that's good news, I think. I can go to my trips, I can go to new trip. This is all seems to be working okay. All right, so I definitely, did we not do anything about making these links yet? I thought we did. I guess we didn't.
I think we stopped right before.
Okay, so that's basically where we are, I suppose. Let's see what happens when we create a new trip. This is going to be Hawaii 2023, which starts July 1st, 23, ends July 10th, 2023. Let's just see that that looks good. Okay, once that trip is created, this isn't right. Okay, this is where we left off, right? This is where we stopped. Does that sound right?
Yes.
I created a trip on my back end. I've successfully got a trip coming back through here. But first, one thing is the response looks a little hefty, right? This doesn't seem like it's, I don't know if I want all this information. And if I look in my Redux Dev Tools, whoa, what was that? What is this? What is this even? I have no idea what that is. That was very strange. Okay, so let's see what our trips looks like. So my trips, if we look at one of these things, okay, actually that looks pretty good. But that's not the last trip we made, is it? So this is where we left off. Okay, trying to get my head straight here. So what are we missing here? What seems to be the case where if I look at these trips, I've got my 10th trip in there is a trip to Mexico. And that's the last thing I see down here. If I refresh this page, I'm still logged in and I look at my trips, I now have Hawaii 2023. So what's missing? What didn't happen that needs to happen? There's a few good answers here. I'll show it again. If I create a new trip, let's say we're going to Colorado. We're going to go in, I don't know, whatever month this is, October 10/20, 2019, 10/28, 2019. I said 28 and I typed 29. When I click Create Trip, okay, if I check my network, good things happened, right? There's a nice happy response. If I look at my Redux, the last thing that happened was update the form. Nothing happened in my state that has updated my trips, and I'm still sitting at trips new. So someone help me out here. What steps do I need to take? Like, first, let's think about what we want that's not happening.
Add a trip.
Add the trip to what?
Your state.
Yes, so add that new trip that was just created to my Redux store. That's definitely one thing I need to do. Okay, what else?
Reroute.
Yeah, I want to go somewhere else. I want to go see that thing I just made, right? Or at least that's something we often do. We could go somewhere else too if we wanted to, but definitely reroute. So add it to my Redux store and reroute. And I think there's one more thing that we could think about might need to happen. I'll let us think about it for a minute. We'll take care of those things because those are, I think, the most important. So let's go and find my trips actions, because that's where this stuff is happening, where I just created a trip. And this is the response. This is my fetch request. It looks like we're getting a good response, but now what, right? This is where we are. We're logging it, but nothing good is happening from there. So this is now my response, and I need to do something. And as we mentioned, we need to go somewhere else, maybe like trip show. Okay. Then I need to add the new trip to the store. Okay. So I think, if I remember, yes, and I did this thing where I have an action creator for add trip, and I think I even added it to my reducer. Does that sound right? Let's put this to the right for now. I think I did this, yeah, add trip, where it's state dot, by the way, that shouldn't be state dot trips. This is just the state of my trips. So there is no state dot trips. Cool. So then, and this is add trip should be action dot trip as well. So there's a couple of typos there, and let's just make sure that that jives. Here's add trip, type of add trip, carrying a trip object, and that trip object should be concatenated here to the state. That state is the array. So that's a couple of typos that we had hidden, that I had hidden there. So let's fix those. And cool. So this is one thing, which is concatenating. Whoops, where did we go? Here we are. Concatenating my trip. So let me just comment out some of these that I'm not using. Focus on the ones we are using. Add trip. So how can I make this happen? How can I add this thing to the Redux store? What's the syntax look like? How do I do it here?
Go to dispatch.
Yes. Dispatch what?
Your action.
And how do I? Yeah, this is the action I want to dispatch.
So it's add trip and then your function, add trip.
Yeah, I get that action by invoking my action creator with the information it needs. And that returns to me the object that I'm actually dispatching, which will then trigger or invoke all of my reducers. The one that I'm going to catch on is this one, where I will just concatenate that new trip to my state. This particular state refers to just the state of my trips. When I export this one, when I export, I should say, be specific, when I export this reducer function, I use it in my reducer, or sorry, in my store. I add something called my trips. It's an array. This is the reducer that handles that particular piece of the Redux state. And so it's just an array. That's all I need to return here. That's what I have going on. Hopefully, let's see what happens. So I'm going to save this. And let's look what happens if I create a trip. Trip is not defined. Okay, line 65. That's because I called it response. By the way, this should be an if statement. If the response is carrying an error, let's alert the error. Otherwise, this chunk here represents success. And so that looks much better. Okay. And I should actually take a peek at the back end. And that's what we're going to do next as a result. I know that's what's going to happen here. So I'm not going to be happy with what we get back. So I'm going to create a new trip. Let's call it go to Washington. And let's say tomorrow. I'll come back the next week. As you can see, I'm getting lazier with this. Okay, if I look at my state change, here's my trips. I've got this array of states. And my last one, let's look at my second to last one, which is this guy. I've got an ID, a type, and a list of attributes. My last one says an ID, a start date, an end date, a location ID, a user ID, a created at, an updated at, and a name. What's the problem here? Why is number 13, that newest one, formatted so much differently from number 12?
I think you have to look at your serializers. Yeah,
I need to look at my controller and see what in the world is being serialized versus what's not. So, and then this is a warning I have for those of you who choose to use scaffold generators, which I do and don't recommend. Like, they're so awesome and shortcutty, and they're terrible in shortcutting because you end up with code bloat, stuff that you're not going to use, or that you have errors that you didn't realize because you have code that you didn't write and you didn't think about. So just be careful if you're using scaffold generators. I don't think I've touched this yet, really. Or if I have, I've only done a few little things. So I'm creating a new trip, and if the trip saves, we're just rendering JSON status created. I think I might have touched this a little bit. Otherwise, we are rendering an error. Okay, I guess I did do some stuff here. But I don't want to just render trip. Other places, like in index, I'm serializing those things. So that's actually what I want to do. I want to make sure that I'm serializing my trip that I'm returning. So I'm just going to copy this code because it's the exact same thing, except that instead of trips, it's now this brand new trip object. And now let's create a new one. So let's go to Denver, and we'll go February and come back in March. Okay, so now if I look at my trips, let's go back to state, my trips. And that very last one there now has this thing data. And now now we have this seemingly extra key of data, and it has ID, type, and attributes. Something seems a little bit wrong there. What's the problem now? If I look under data, everything under data looks the same as it was on the previous one. So the only thing that seems extra is this key of data. Why is that? Any thoughts?
Is that just the name of what you're passing into your controller? Like
It's the name of what the controller is passing back. And so I need to, yeah, right? And so it's the name of what the response. So if I look in the network and I look at that response, I have a top level key of data that holds everything. And this object that data is pointing to is what I actually want to be the trip object itself. And so that's a pretty easy fix. In my action creator, when I got my response back, I know that I actually want to add the trip itself, which is being under the key of data. So the object I want is here. Did I have that same issue here? Get my trips? Yes, and so you can see that I actually was doing the same thing already with my initial GET request. Okay, so this is just a matter of playing nice with the serializer that I'm using, making sure that I get what I actually want out of that thing. Cool, yeah. So let's see, let's go to Tennessee. We'll go, I don't know, oops. Okay, and now let's see what's returned. That's what's returned, but if we look at Redux, hopefully this is now looking, now that looks nice, right? Because now I have a top level key of ID, type, trip, attributes, etc. And if I compare that against my previous trips, those now look identical and uniform. That's good news. Cool, questions? So the one other thing that was mentioned was that we want to go someplace else. So the other place I want to go is where? How do I get there? What did we do last time? Any thoughts? Was there a last time? Is this the first time we've done this in this app?
I think we have to send history down and push the...
Yeah. Yes. Great. Go on. How do I do that? What does that mean?
Well, you got to pass the router props into... I just did this, so I kind of know how to do it.
Okay, good. So you're exactly right. And let's think about how we're going to do this. Let's find the files who are at play here. I know that I'm dealing with my new trip form, right? So I'll split that to the right. Is that oops, split to the left, whatever. Is this the one that actually has the create trip? It is. So when I call create trip, which is right here, I'm passing the form data and the user ID. What's missing?
You need the router props.
I need the router props. So let's find out, first of all, if we have them available. And the way to check, the easy way to check is go to React DevTools. Use my little finder, click on something inside the form, go up to my new trip form, and sure enough, I've got history, location, and match already available. This is great news. By the way, how are those available? create trip form data, history, match, update, blah, blah, blah.
Did you wrap app in router or index in router?
I did, so app.js is wrapped, app.js itself is wrapped in browser router, but that doesn't pass anything to app in particular in terms of the props. The reason that the form has the props is, or maybe this is what you meant, inside of app, I'm rendering trips new as a child directly of a route. And when that happens, route, if I use this component, then route will automatically pass those props along to this component. If I split it up into render, like I do here, then I have to be more explicit about which router props I want to supply. I can supply them all, or I can pick and choose. In this one, I'm getting them all because I'm using this syntax pointed to component as a child of a route. It's going to get those router props. So that's good news. So then how do I use those? So who needs them? Like, where do I need to send that along?
Just make a comma after user ID and then pass in this .props.history.
Is this, so I would say yes, except that, is this a class component? So you're 100% right with what I need to do, but the syntax is.
Is it history.props?
So it looks like I've already thought about this or used it, because if you notice, this is a functional component. And so functional component means that we're not going to use this dot. There's not going to be this dot props. We would just have our props object coming in as an argument. And I've already destructured a ton of those, including, by the way, history. And so the idea is 100% correct. The syntax, though, because I've destructured so much of these props, including the history prop, that means I have this available as a variable, and I can just say history if I spell it right. And now I'm passing form data. No, wait a minute. I don't want this to be part of this object, right? Because this object represents the data going back to the backend. So it's actually a second argument of history here. History. There we go. And so now in my action creator over here, I'm not just getting trip data. I'm also getting the history prop object, which allows me then to do what? Anyone?
Can you history.push to the location you want to go?
I sure can. And what location is that?
That looks good.
Do I just want to go to my index, or do I want to go to my show page for this brand new trip?
I like indices, but
I'd like to go to I'd like to see the actual show page. I think I'd like to kind of show this in a pattern that we're all familiar with, where we create something, we immediately get to see it. I think that would feel nice. So let's think about, like, I think we need an identifier here, and I think response.data.id should be this brand new thing now carrying an ID. In fact, I think the response itself, if I'm not mistaken, let's go double check this. I think the response itself, no, it is response.data.id. Let's look. Let's just try it. I think it's response.data.id. That's right. Because then we get the data top level, the ID top level of the object that represents the trip, even though its attributes are nested under a key of attributes. ID actually is top level, so I think that'll do it. Let's try it. We'll be brave. And let's see what happens. So I'm going to go to new trip, and I'm going to create a trip now to, by the way, y'all can suggest, let's go to Whistler, BC. Y'all can suggest places to go if you want. I'm not trying to hog all the places to go. Well, we're really planning for the future here. It's a short trip. No, it's a long trip. Okay, good. Okay, when we create this trip, now look, check it out. We went to the right place. That's good news, isn't it? I think it is. If we look at my new trip form, is that a problem?
Yeah, you'll want to clear that before you reroute.
Yeah, and now wait a minute. Why do I have to do that?
Because you're not refreshing.
Okay, yes, that's true. I'm not refreshing the page. Who owns this form data?
New trip form.
And that was such a terrible question. Am I controlling the trip data form via React or Redux? Redux. And when I'm using Redux to control state, and I'm building a single page application, every single change to that state needs to be prescribed, and like I need to write it. If I were using, I'm contrasting this against using React to control form data, because if I have a form that renders in React, and React itself is holding the state for that form, as soon as that component unmounts, when it remounts, then when it mounts again, it's going to go back to its initial state. So sometimes form data is nice to hold in React because it kind of takes care of that almost automatically. As soon as a component unmounts, we can forget it and it's going to remount. I don't have to sort of explicitly clear it necessarily. Whereas here, if I'm using Redux to hold this, it's great because I look in one place, I see all my stuff, but I do have to think about actually clearing this myself. I think we actually, we didn't build. Did we build something around that here last time? I don't remember what I actually built in terms of actions for the form. Nope. Okay, so update new trip form. So let's do a reset new trip form. Does not need an argument. Doesn't need anything. Doesn't need an action, anything but a type of reset. Reset. I'm going to copy this so I don't screw it up. Open up my reducer. And this is the flow, right? Of when I need to make a change, I have to think about the action I need. I need to make sure that the action that I build, the action creator I build, has a corresponding type and is actually going to catch somewhere in the corresponding reducer. So let's find that reducer. And now, I already did build the case statement for it, but I hadn't built the action creator for it yet, is what it appears. So now I've got my action creator. Now I've got my reset new trip form. And so finally in my trips actions over here, one of the problems is that this is my trips has to do with my trips in terms of the action creator file. Over here, this action creator has to do with trip form, new trip form. So how can I get the action that I need, reset new trip form, over here into this file?
Would you import it?
I can import it. So I can import reset new trip form from, nice, we're already in the same folder, so a new trip form. And now I can just dispatch that as well. Cool, so there are three things I'm doing here. I'm adding the trip to my Redux store, I'm dispatching to clear the form, and I'm going someplace else. So three things are happening there, which is nice. Notice that if there's a problem, I'm not going to go anywhere else. I'm not going to reset the form. And I'm not going to add to my store. And let's actually double check in our backend that I have any validations. Okay, I do have validates name and user. Okay, cool. So then if I come here again, whoops, reset trip form, reset new trip form, reset new trip form, whoops. It's because this is a syntax error. Okay. Cool. So notice that if I try to create the trip, name can't be blank. That's good news. If I log out, well, I can't even get to that form anymore. That was silly. If I try to submit it, though, without being logged in, I would also get an error. So now if I go to new trip, and let's create a trip to, I don't know, Oregon. And let's go tomorrow. And we'll come back in 2 weeks. And if I create that trip, I'm now in the show page. If I go back to new trip, my form is clear. That's good news, right? And I can see those actions reflected here in my Redux Dev Tools. When I added the trip, we also reset the form. And there's that last change. That's all good news. Now we have to deal with the fact that where we were routed to was a route that doesn't exist. Oops, I have a chat question. Oh, yes, should update without a refresh. I'm not sure when you said that, Sarah. I'm sorry, but it's always true. Was there a refresh? Oh, did we have a refresh? Is that what you're saying? Did that just happen? I don't know. Let's look. Did we end up with a refresh there a while back? We shouldn't have. We have event.preventedFault.
Hey, Howard,
Yeah.
I found that when you do a history.push, you get a refresh. It's like entering something in the bar.
Yeah. History.push does give us. That is true. It doesn't reset though. Like it doesn't fire a new, it's like it is kind of like a page refresh in that sense, but it doesn't it's not a hard page refresh in that it doesn't reset our like any state that we have, right? So maybe if it did look like one, that might be what you saw. I'm not sure. Let me know if you see that again, and we'll look at whatever it is. But notice that like if I actually refresh the page, everything resets and Redux does its added initial flush, and everything's cleared out. But if I just do a history as a result of a history.push, and this doesn't happen, we don't like lose all of our state. We still have all the state that we had before. So there is a difference there.
But when you refreshed, you were still logged in as Nadia.
Yeah, and I definitely want that. Right, that's the whole point of having built my login feature on the back end, right? Using sessions so that I can stay logged in even when I refresh and even when I close. And if I close Chrome and I walk away and I come back in a few hours, I'll still be logged in. That's what I want. Right?
Okay, yeah.
Cool. By the way, this is kind of bothering me. Let me just do a quick, I want to, it's all jammed together there. Let me just grab, flex direction row. If this is, I think I can do like flex justify or something like that. Flex. Yeah, I forget now. What's my flex wrap maybe? I forget. I was trying to think about how to space those out. I gotta do some polishing on flex. It'd be nice if these were kind of spread out across the top instead of jammed together. But anyway, let's get to the problem at hand, which is if I go to like trips number 17, nothing happens. So, and that was a full page refresh because I physically went in and did that rather than like a history.push. So let's think about what we need to make that happen. So right now we don't have, if I look at my main route, so I need to go back and look at app. Kind of clear all this out, close these things up, get to where we can sort of start fresh. Let's close our back end up too. Okay, so here we go, source, components. No, we're in app actually. So I have these routes, which I'm building kind of a RESTful routing pattern here. And I know that I want to do something like trips ID. And I want it to go to like a trip card of some sort or something like that. Do I have a trip card? No. Yes, I do. Let's see what it looks like. Nothing, really. So now what I want this trip card to be, I want it to look like an individual trip with all of its attributes, like a little sort of snapshot of what this thing looks like. And I think this should really be a div. And it should definitely have like this kind of stuff in it. Trip has a name, start date, end date. That's pretty much it, right? Maybe the name should be a header instead of a p tag. These should be indented because they're children of the div. Okay. That looks pretty good. So now when I route to a particular trip, I should be rendering this div card, this trip card, right? Let's try it. That didn't seem to work, did it? Or did it? Why did we not get an error? Oh, I didn't save this. There we go. When in doubt, don't forget to save. There we go. That looks better. Trip card is not defined. Let's import it. Okay. Cannot read property name of undefined, attributes of undefined. No, I don't know, I'm guessing. Cannot read property attributes of undefined. Why am I getting that error? What's the problem here? Trip card expects what as a problem?
Well, I think the trip is coming through as undefined the first time you load everything up.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So I could handle that here if I wanted to. I could say something like, hey, do I have a trip? If I do, then render this thing. And I should actually, this is, I think, let's see, do I have a trip? If so, render this. Otherwise, no. Okay, so that should help if my syntax is right there. Okay, great. So now I'm not seeing anything there. There's no error. This is still seemingly not great, but you're right. The problem is I'm not getting a trip. And I could, like, just to be clear, I could say like something like just to sort of like a little. Sometimes it's nice to give yourself a little note, like this is the trip card. Hard with no trip. Okay. That way I can kind of see, sometimes I know eventually I'm going to turn that to null, but for now I can tell myself, okay, I am hitting that, right? If I inspect it, I can see my trip card, I can see the props that it's getting, but no bueno here. So there's a couple, like, who has some ideas of how we can remedy this current situation? Thoughts?
Do you need to do like a dispatch and add that? No.
So dispatch would change, when I dispatch, I'm changing my Redux store, and there's really no change in the state of the application that needs to happen, at least in terms of the information Redux is holding.
Right, just display.
Here, I need to pass a prop to trip card. So how can I pass a prop? Can I do it using component this way? I mean, maybe I could, but a better way would be maybe let's use render.
Render, yeah.
Yeah, let's use a render. And we're going to wrap this. I'm going to open this up now into a multi-line function. Okay. There we go, something like that. So I know I want to return eventually a trip card. And I know I need to give it some props. I could just pass these props along. And what I'm doing here is saying, make sure to give, right now we're going to give trip card all the props that are incoming and that are being passed down through route. So for example, if I look here and I inspect this card using React, so I can see my props and my state. If I look at trip card, I'm getting my router props. Whereas if I use render and I don't do this, I'm explicitly excluding those props from that component. So now if I inspect my page using React, I should say inspect my trip card, I have no props. So I'm explicitly pulling the props I want. So for now, I'm going to grab all of them. And I might change that in a minute and just specify more specific ones. But now, the problem here is what? I need to get what? What do I need?
You need your attributes.
Yeah, what attribute do I need to pass down to trip card?
Your name, your start date and end date.
Well, what object contains that information? I need my trip object, right? Yeah. Right now, do I have any of the trip objects in app?
No.
No, and so I need to change that. I need to get more state, please. So give me the trips, and I've been calling it my trips, so I'm just going to say my trips, and that points to state.mytrips. Okay, so let's do that. And now I can actually access this.props.mytrips, which is the sort of the set of trips. I'm already destructuring here, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing here, just to grab a variable now called my trips. By the way, I don't have to call it my trips. I could just call it trips. I can call it whatever I want. It's up to me, as long as I reference the correct name and state. So now I have the trips here, and how am I going to get the correct trip now? Oops, those aren't question marks. Those are supposed to be question marks. How do I do this? What is this trip?
Isn't it
Filter my trip.
cross-sec trips?
Find the right ID.
Okay, so trips.filter. And I know filter takes a callback where it's going to cycle through. And what's my condition here? I'm going to match by its ID equals what? What router prop gives me the ability to look at the parameters from the URL and grab the one that I need?
Params ID.
Who has params? History, location, or match?
Try match. I don't.
Match.params.id. There it is. So params here is intentionally called params because it acts. This is how it's acting. It's grabbing all the dynamic pieces of the URL whose names will be defined here. This should sound very similar to Sinatra and to Rails. The dynamic pieces of the URL are captured and stored in an object called params. The keys come from whatever I call this thing, right? If I called it fish, for example. Okay, and I save that. This is going to fail. I'll just say null for now. If I change it to fish, then if I inspect this again, oops, inspect, there we go. Trip card, match.props.match.params.fish is now 17. If I change this to taco, just because I love fish tacos, trips, taco, there we go. Now I should have a key of fish with a value of taco, right? So now if I search again, find my trip card, my match, params, fish, taco. Okay, fish is the dynamic piece of the URL. That's how I named the route, the dynamic piece of the route anyway. And the value that it received, in this case, based on my manipulating the URL, is taco. But that doesn't make any sense, so let's go back to ID. And let's say our trip.id needs to match. And I have here the match prop under props. So props.match.params.id. Now, we should, now this should hopefully find our trip. So let's console log this. Console log trip. And let's just see if we got the trip we want. Oops, there's no trip with taco. So let's do 17, I think was a good one. Let's look on our console, and we're looking to see if we see that console log come back with a trip. I think that's it. Remember, filter returns an array, so I actually don't want filter, I want find, because I only want one object. And now I should see a single trip object, and there it is. That's good news. So now I can take that object and pass it down as a prop to my trip card. I save that and refresh the page. Well, not refresh, React is refreshing. I should then see Whistler BC, and it looks like I have a start date and no end date. That doesn't seem right. Let's look at attributes. Ooh, end date is null. Ooh, what did I do wrong there? Let's look. Why would end date be null? That's something we obviously didn't catch in our action creator, maybe. My trips. When we created our trip, end date, trip data.end date. Do we have this in our form? Oops, form component. Does form data have an end date in it? Hard to tell. Should. Looks like it does. Let's double check our backend. Oops, controllers, API v1 trips. Start date, end date. What gives? End date null. Let's see, do all of ours have end date null?
I'm wondering what that field is defined as in the database.
So 15, start date and end date null for Tennessee. Ooh, and for Denver. Ooh, okay, so this something was breaking. We thought we had all this glorious success, and this is clearly not successful. But I wonder what happens on, no, we did page refresh, didn't we? This is actually coming from, all right, so here's where part of the problem here is that the back end is docking in snake case and the front end is docking in camel case. So let's see how many of these. So it looks like Hawaii. Is this the first one that I made today? I think it is. No, I thought Hawaii. Didn't I make Hawaii today?
Yeah, you made Hawaii today.
So Hawaii worked.
Hey Howard, could you
Do
look at the
validation on the
definition in the
dates.
database?
Sorry, both Chris and Sally, you both said this something at the same time. Do I have validations? I think so.
Yeah, I think you define the fields in the database as actual dates. So when you put in like tomorrow and next day, it might have just kicked it out on you.
Oh,
That's what I
yeah.
was saying, yeah.
I think you might be right. Did I actually do that? How silly of me.
Why don't you just create a new one with actual dates, and if that works,
Yeah.
now it's the validation.
Yeah, but that's weird because I thought I actually, for like this one, I thought I did. Yeah, let's do that though. So I'm going to create a new trip. Let's go to, I don't know, Europe. And let's actually go on January 1st, 2020. And let's come back on January 12th, 2021. It's a long trip to Europe. And there it is. So yeah, it must be that I really actually do have to be careful to format those correctly. Ooh, that's annoying. That means that I have a bunch of null dates in my database. That's okay. Good to know now. I won't make that mistake again. That's exactly it. So let's just double check in our back end. And I think you all hit the nail on the head. If I look at my schema for trips, I did say date. Yeah, okay. So I need to be more careful with that, which means that I really shouldn't allow that, right? I should be more careful and I should actually maybe have like a date selector or something like that. So that's something to put in the dev log, you know. So basically I should never send that kind of bad data. Don't send bad date data to the back end. We could fix that down the road. Okay. All right, good enough though, but at least we can see my trips. And now I don't want to see all this information here. I don't want these to be trip cards. What do I want these to all be?
Links?
Yeah, we should definitely now change this around. So I want these to be links. I only want to see an individual, all that really information, if I'm looking at the actual show page or I'm looking at the card itself. So now we need to come back to my trips and refactor that as well. I like to clear this out. I know I just need to clean up my trips. I don't really think I need to do anything here. So let's find my trips, which is not in the back end. Close my folders. Close everything until we find what we need, which is my trips. Okay, there it is. So now instead of these trip cards, I would actually like to build a bunch of links. So I definitely need a link. From React Router DOM, I no longer need trip card. I'm now going to be mapping to links, and I can still have the trip, I can still have the key, but where I need to go is now, whoops, no, I don't need the trip anymore, just the key. And let's go to where? Where am I going?
Your path, so trips. Right.
Like that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is another one that checks to make sure that we're not null, or that we have actually these things, and we're returning trip cards. We're directly grabbing my trips.
I'm about to say,
What's that?
we have no text in our link.
Oh, thank you. I always forget that, and you always catch me, Chris. And I don't know what I'm going to do. You're not allowed to graduate. I know you submitted your project, but I need someone to tell me that my links need text. So what do we want as the text here?
T.name maybe?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. Is that just my editor, or did I make a mistake there? What's wrong there? Does this need to be wrapped? Would that be better if it was wrapped? No, this shouldn't need to be wrapped. Let's just see. It doesn't like it. Okay. Link to this stuff. That's that.
Are we missing a paren?
Yes. Because this was just wrapping my map. Cool. Why is it still? It still doesn't look like it likes it. And could wrap.
Trip course doesn't have to be in JSX. And return.
It's not. It's just the same as this.
Okay.
But it still doesn't like this somehow. What if I just rewrite this? So there's my map. And I know I'm going to go to this thing with, I'm just going to wrap my return value here just for fun. It's going to be a link. I'm going to close my link. Give my link some text. I'm going to add my to property. I'm going to go to trips/t.id. And to satisfy my mapping, I'm going to give it a key property also of t.id. So that React doesn't complain. All right, it likes that. I don't know what's different there than what was different a minute ago. Still doesn't like it though, huh? Yes, that should be expression or quoted.js text. I don't understand. What if I just wrap this? Maybe that was it. That was it. Okay, sorry. I didn't need to wrap my... I guess if I have interpolation here, it's not going to pick up on the interpolation unless I wrap with JavaScript. If it's just a plain string, then I can just wrap a plain string. I didn't realize that. I guess I should have realized that. Because I'm doing some JavaScript things in here, I need to wrap the whole thing and say, read this in JavaScript. If it's a plain string, it's okay. All right, so now if we go to my trips, nothing. Okay, that's okay. Let's think about that. So first of all, again, we're going to sort of tell ourselves in a little p tag that this is my trips with an empty array of trips. Okay. Do we at least get that? Yes. Okay. So why is my trips not populating apparently with trips? Or is it? Actually, look, it disappeared. So it does seem to have its trips. Let's look at that again. So if we look at, if I look in React, I try to inspect this page, which is kind of hard here. Do I actually have my trips, which is trips, this guy, route, link. Yeah, nothing's going on there. Let's look again. So let's see if we look in app.js. We're going to trips. We should be rendering my trips. This is my trips. So what if I does anybody see a problem? I don't. We'll find it. So what if I do something like this? And just this is kind of me thinking about how to troubleshoot this. I'm going to return. I'm going to change this into a div. So I'm going to say I'm going to return a div. I'm just going to open this up so that I can see it. And in the div is going to be a link. And I'm going to close my div. And I'm going to say something else like, hello. Oops, how about like a p tag or something? So what I want to know is like, was this thing like somehow not working? Let's see. This is my trips, and there's a bunch of hellos. Okay, so my link, something's wrong with my link. Or my t.name. Trips is state.mytrips. What's going on here? This is very confusing. So let's look at my trips. There's my trips array. It seems like I have, oh, it's under attributes. I always forget that, you know? I gotta remember not to forget that, or I need to change it. It's trips.attributes.name. So silly, that's me, it's my fault, forgot. Keep forgetting the way I have my own data structured. Okay, t.attributes.name. ID is top level, but name is an attribute. So now I should see an array of links to all my trips. There they are, that looks terrible. So then let's wrap this in a JSX, or I should say a React fragment. And it's going to complain about not having a key, but I don't really care. And that way I can just insert a break tag here. There we go. Okay, that should look not much nicer, hopefully. There they are. Okay, so now I can see my trips. That's good news, and I can click on a single trip and I can see it there. Back to my trips, click on them. There they are, each trip. This is looking much nicer. So I think like the next step in functionality, well, you all tell me, like, what are you all thinking? What is it? What can we do that would make this better? Like right now I have the ability to see my trips, to look at a particular trip, to create a new trip. What else do we want to be able to do?
Update a trip.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to be able to update a trip. And so I think that really belongs in the trip card, which I think is what this guy right here. So I would want some kind of functionality here where at the bottom of this div, I might have like a button or something. I don't know what it might be. And actually, I think it should actually be, in this case, a link if we're going to use edit. So I'm going to say import link from React Router DOM. Okay, and if I do something like a link, and I give it some text, and I give it a 2, where's my 2 going to go?
Trip form?
Good. That's a great question. Is it going to go to the trip form? Like, do I have if we look at my routes, for example, where are we going to go with this? Here are the routes that I have, right? And this is starting to look a little bit RESTful here, right? I've got trips new, trip ID. What would the RESTful route for an edit form, for an edit route be?
Slash trip slash colon ID slash edit.
Yeah, exactly. Except here, I'm actually providing what this needs to be. I need to provide the value, and I have that, fortunately, because I have my trip object. So I need to then make a corresponding route. And it's going to be somewhat similar to this one, right? Where because I need to find an object. I'm going to go ahead and grab /edit on the back of that. I still need to grab my props. I still need to grab the particular trip based on, this is all the same, right? Because I know that this thing is now going to need a trip object, whatever it is. And Sally said, like, what about trip form? And unfortunately, right now, I call this thing new trip form, and I regret that already. So I'm going to say new trip form because that's what I named the component. New trip form, though, is not expecting a trip object, right? Nowhere in here do I actually grab the trip itself, right? New trip form just looks to the Redux store for the form data to populate the inputs. And here we're going to come to a bit of a crossroads and a little bit of a problem that we're going to have to solve. The question is, first of all, like, do we want new trip form at all? So the first question is, do I want that or do I want this, right? Do I want edit trip form? Do I use 2 totally separate form components, one for new form, one for edit form? Or do I want to reuse a single form component? And we can compare this problem to Rails, right? Edit trip form is not defined. Yes, I know that. I'll say new trip form for now. So let's just make sure, that's good news, though, by the way, that we saw that. No, it's not. Well, whatever, it doesn't matter. If we go to edit this trip, that's what I want to know. Did we get here? Yes, we did. So we got to this route now is rendering the form. And the question is, do I want to reuse my form? And if you remember with Rails, we built what to reuse forms? What was the tool we used in Rails and in Sinatra, if you got that far in Sinatra?
Well, patch on.
Okay, we're definitely gonna need to build a fetch request for a patch request, yes. But in terms of like just loading the form itself, so before we ever get to like filling out the data and sending it to the back end, in order to just view the form, in Rails, what was that tool that we used? Where we started something with an underscore in our little view file tree.
A helper, right?
So what kind of helper? Yeah, specifically, like what were these little things where we would have a little underscore at the beginning of the name of these things? Does anyone remember form partials?
Oh yeah.
Form partials, does that ring any bells?
Yeah.
Where the form partial is like the stripped down raw version of the form itself that you could then use to create or to edit based on whether we passed in an object or not, right? Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
So there are, so my opinion is if we have a form for one resource and the form looks the same in two places, maybe we should use the same form. But clearly some of this information is going to be different. Like I'm not going to be creating a trip, I'm going to be updating a trip, and that's significantly different. Like I'm not going to try and squeeze both creation and updating into the same action creator. That's an anti-pattern, right? That's too much. So I think we're going to have to think about maybe I change this so it's just trip form. And I can think about, there's a couple ways that we could do it. We're going to run into some really neat problems about how this can be a challenge because it seems so simple. Oh, well then we just need to take a trip object because I have my form data in Redux, tell Redux to put that in there, right? So easy. Like what if I just did something like, okay, I've got my trip. And so now I'm just going to dispatch right here. I could dispatch some sort of an update form and pass in my trip, right? The problem is that I'm inside of render here. Redux and React, they won't allow this. This is illegal. This is an illegal state change because I'm inside of a render method, and render methods need to be pure, right? So this becomes a little bit of a problem. There's a few different solutions to this problem, and that's what we'll get into next time. I wish you all a very good Tuesday evening. Anyone have any questions?
Nope. Thanks again, Howard.
Awesome. Well, this was fun. I look forward to finishing this up, to getting into the edit functionality tomorrow. There are multiple ways to do it, so we're gonna have to pick a way. We'll talk about a couple different ways. We'll pick a way and we'll charge forward, and we'll finish out our CRUD.
All right.
Thank
Are
you.
you going to post the code before tomorrow, or
Pardon?
posting the code?
Yes, I will make it a point to post the code this evening.
Great.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Thank
everybody,
you.
have an awesome evening, and I'll see you all hopefully tomorrow.
Great. Thanks, Howard.
Okay, bye.